Through the help of the Spotify playlist and TikTok, Hyperpop is just getting bigger and bigger. And as it becomes more and more enveloped into mainstream pop culture, it's important to talk about the ways in which the scene culture still has room to grow. Despite hyperpop generally being an incredibly inclusive musical space, historically, the scene has been criticized for its lack of racial diversity, though that's improving with this new generation. And as great as it is in fostering the LGBTQ community, some believe it can improve in that space as well.
For the amount that hyperpop has amplified certain voices, like a lot of stuff in hyperpop that is made by people who are queer or trans, those people tend to fit into like very specific visual molds that I think are like what people expect us to look like. Like I fucking love Dorian Electra, but also Dorian does fit into like a very specific trans mask androgynous mold, right. White, skinny, conventionally attractive. They visually fit this mold that a lot of people want to consume. Like people making it, you do whatever makes you feel fulfilled. But like from a consumer standpoint, I don't think a lot of people think about what they're consuming and why. These people being visible still is doing a lot of good and is really important. And not a lot of people like want to think about, okay, like, well, what can we do next? How do we keep pushing this forward?
Another pressing matter is how young the scene is, and how individuals navigate the inherent power dynamics that exist when older artists work with underage artists.
I am not against teenagers having music scenes and making friends. That's fantastic. It's great. What I don't like is that adults are getting involved in it, and it's very suspect. I think there's kind of two camps of older people. There's older people who are like, wow, that's great. I don't really get it though. I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing or incorporate that a little bit. And then there's adults who are like, I can get in on the ground floor of this. I'm going to produce for these kids. I'm going to feature with these kids. And I'm also going to be friends with them. And obviously horrible things happen in real life. But the issue on the internet is that you can't hold people accountable at all. It's very possible for people who are in positions of power like that to make people around them feel comfortable and not make it weird. But the people who are making it weird are going for this community in particular because it's perfect for that. Get some fucking boundaries. If you're an older musician working with younger musicians, you can be friends, but they're children. I know it's the internet and you can interpret people however you want, but if you are older and working with underage people, you have to be constantly thinking about, how am I treating this person? This is a teenager.
Maybe this sounds old-fashioned, but like the reality is like we need more like guardians and parents helping solicit these behaviors. I think that's a big part of the problem is you're just like throwing a bunch of peers together who have no guidance, no mentorship, no discipline. And then you end up with a 20-year-old texting an underage person or something, like things that they shouldn't be. And it's like, if that person had better judgment and hopefully better guidance and someone that could have helped monitor and keep them accountable, like I feel like a lot of stuff like that could have been prevented. People feel greatly unmonitored and they just kind of think that anything goes when they're by themselves and their feelings are just going, and they start saying and doing things that are actually really harmful to the people around them. And it's like, that's not okay.
It isn't an inherently bad thing, but what sucks is that the landscape is such that it becomes a red flag, and for good reason.
Well, the accessibility of the scene is definitely a double-edged sword, you know. Inclusivity is the forefront of the space. Devious people have used their mere presence in the scene to disguise their ulterior motives. Some act as a figure or a friend, a fan. Through this position, they were able to harm the same people that the space was created for. It's really horrifying. All the work, you know, the community puts into making this a safe place for vulnerable, marginalized people, especially older people or people with, you know, bad intentions, have openings, like clear openings to take advantage of them, whether it's through messaging or replying to posts. What we can do is to, you know, watch for red flags, pay closer attention to shady behavior, and hold people accountable, of course.
And then there's the Spotify issue. The Hyperpop playlist has commercialized the scene and classified a thing initially defined by its lack of classification. Hyperpop as a whole can now be readily identified, and the controversy is real.
Remember when A.G. Cook put out the playlist on Spotify and it was just like a bunch of weird shit A.G. Cook liked, and everybody got mad because it should have included like, oh, it should include this guy and that guy. That was kind of like the signifier to me, like, oh, this is something completely different now. Because if that came out in 2010 or 12, people were like, oh my god, this stuff's amazing. That's the idea behind Hyperpop. It's like, it's just as much Dilla as it is 303 or Rebecca Black. It can be. Now there's like a right or wrong.
What A.G. Cook put on there was awesome. It was great. But people were mad because that's not how the genre sounds to them. And that really showed the split between the two different things. There's what that was, I guess, before, and now there's what the teens want, which is, I guess, 745 Sticky, the genre.
AG put a bunch of like, you know, really already well-known like musicians of the past. And then people were freaking out because they weren't getting their plays because they weren't on the playlist anymore. That's not what that's there for. Like, the function has disappeared. Like, no longer are you looking to this playlist to find music. Now you're just like looking to this playlist to promote yours. I don't know. It's that thing where it's like, I can't blame them, right? Like, they're upset about this. You know, I'm not mad at these people for being upset about it. What I'm mad at is that Spotify has manipulated the system in a way where that becomes an issue. It's that like typical American dream shit where they make this exclusive thing and then they make it seem so accessible to everybody and like, oh, I could get on that. And I mean, you can, and that's cool, but I don't like how reliant people are on it. And I can't even blame them, right? Like, of course, like that's a great way to get known, and everybody's trying to make money off your art so you can keep doing it more.
What is an important aspect of it is the financial aspect of just like, this playlist is actively like helping out a lot of smaller artists. A lot of those artists are marginalized, and like, this is a really important source of income. And the issues that I have are, we're like looking at it specifically from the Hyperpop playlist perspective, certain things being added and taken away, how like that just cut off that person's income. That isn't really a conversation about the playlist, and more is about just streaming and income and music in general. The fact that that is even a reality of just like, oh, you're not on this playlist anymore, like, are you gonna make rent? That's fucking silly.
Yeah, if you want to get pissed at the fact that Spotify pays us less than a penny per stream. Like 20 or 30 hours of music streamed on Spotify, which is a lot of hours. You listen to my music for 30 hours? That's a lot of that's a lot of me. That's too much me for me. You listen to me for 30 hours, that's like $2 on Spotify. Like, I was #1 on some of their like year-on wrap-ups of like 30-hour listen, $2. Get mad at that. Go get pissed at that. Like, that's, come on, don't get pissed at, yeah, I don't know.
SoundCloud is curated by people, the people who love the music, and not just corporations and, you know, algorithms. It's kind of become so competitive for these like spots in the Hyperpop playlist. This huge community is kind of condensed into this one term, this one image. I don't blame the community at all. Like, if there's anyone to blame, it's the people at the top, like Spotify. It severely underpays artists, and especially now that we're older and, you know, we need jobs, we need money.
The playlist has also created a readily identifiable music home for some, while simultaneously forcing others into a commercial box they don't necessarily agree with, on a sonic or philosophical basis.
It's out of our hands now. Like, we don't really get to decide what our community is called now. It's just kind of, it's what it is. Because before that, we didn't really have a name for it. We were just doing what we were doing, you know? We were just kind of like a community who just so happened to be making music with maybe like a similar ethos. I don't go out to specifically make hyperpop. I don't open FR Studio and be like, today I'm going to make a hyperpop song. I just make what I enjoy. And like, if people enjoy the music, I guess I don't mind what they call it, you know?
I feel like I'm doing my own thing. But if someone wants to classify me as either, I'm not offended, really. I used to, but I learned that it wasn't really a bad thing. It's just a name. Like, people out there still liking the music and stuff. It don't really change anything. Some people do get offended by it. People want to make music, and some people just don't want to be forced categorized into something because they made like a song that got into something, like a playlist, whatever. The artist made the song, but whoever picked that chose its fate, kinda. Nothing is that big.
Hell no, I am not hyperpop. Nope. I really can't put a label on it. Like, I pretty much just make whatever I think sounds good. Oh no, it's kind of dumb. Like, me and Dolly made like an emo song, right? And they put it on a hyperpop playlist, and I was kind of pissed. I'm like, what the fuck? Like, it's not hyperpop, but like, I can understand because it's Dolly, and people like think of Dolly and like, oh, hyperpop, you know?
Can't get away from this. Back of your head. Try to run, but you can't get away from this.
I'm all over the place. I think it's fair to call me hyperpop considering like my track record and the people I associate with. Calling me hyperpop, I'm just gonna be like, well, yeah, I guess like there's no reason to argue. But like at the same time, I'd vouch and encourage people to consider my music punk. I think that I'm approaching things the way that the original punks approached things, speaking out against oppression, making music even though you weren't classically trained, and forming communities where like you find your people, I guess. I'm more at this point like trying to tell people like why the label bothers me and like why the playlist has caused problems, instead of making them think like it's some cool flashy new thing you should totally be part of. Like, because I don't want to give that narrative. I don't think hyperpop is specifically something that you should like go out of your way to try and copy. I don't think you'd get much out of it. You'd be better off just continuing to make the music that you like to make. People would be better off being themselves instead of like trying to be hyperpop.
For me, my tag on Rate Your Music is hyperpop, and I'm fine with that if it meant what music I make, which it kind of does. And it also means a bunch of other kinds of music. So I actually think the biggest dilemma is just us trying to figure out what the hell is going on with this whole Spotify business of just combining as many genres as possible to get everyone to listen to the same playlist.
So it's both, right? I think one, it's useful to actually have a name for a certain a movement, a certain sound, a certain vibe, a certain spirit. It's also sort of flattening too of our understanding of music. We've seen how hyperpop, if it already not being commodified and used for capitalistic purposes, if it's already not happening, it's going to happen. It's gonna be the same sort of like this catchphrase of like this cool music. It's like bedroom pop.
I feel like I'm being obtuse if I don't consider myself hyperpop. I'm just like, I'm not hyperpop, and I'm like, meh, I don't know. I mean, I guess I am, right? Like, I was on the playlist, I am on Dog Show, and I lean into the sound quite a bit. We only know it as hyperpop now because of what, like Spotify? Spotify sucks. They don't make us any money. They're really shitty. I hate them so much. I have this like abusive relationship with Spotify where like I have to put my shit out on there, or else who the fuck's gonna listen to it? But I hate them also because they don't give me any money for my art, and they're a bad company. They do terrible things. So it's just like frustrating that they were able to have so much say in what we are considering this genre and this community.
The idea of like fencing off something into a specific categorizable entity is simply just to be able to market it and algorithmize it. That's why people want to move to like a more formless kind of creation process. And what hyperpop initially represented was like a lot of, like we said, like keep coming back to it, like a lot of different influences and genres and ideas coming together in one kind of form. Like before hyperpop, people were calling things like punk, rap, hip hop, folk, rock. We'd roll our eyes at the people trying to write these things. But that was like the beauty of that scene. You could have things indescribable come into it and just be there. And then eventually became to the point where like this is hyperpop, this isn't. And that doesn't serve like either of those people who are either making it or not making it. It just serves the companies who want to be able to like, oh, this kind of sounds like Rebecca Black, or this kind of sounds like Blink-182, or kind of sounds like that. Oh, we can put these two people together. You're just helping your enemies at that point.
The playlist has brought a spotlight onto this insane pop and electronic music, but at the expense of monetizing a positivity-driven DIY underground community and creating a culture of competitiveness and hostility. A competitiveness about getting on the playlist, and hostility amongst formative members of the scene who feel excluded from the narrative.
In quarantine, I did a lot of meditating on the music industry and seeing all the shit and the garbage that my community has had to suffer. And now I'm like having a staunch anti-Spotify, anti-streaming in general attitude, which ties into hyperpop. Because it's the antithesis of the DIY code, right? Like, you know, if you have a genre that's started mostly by like queer, trans, marginalized individuals, and then we're like supposed to suck up to Spotify now? Like, no.
I just generally don't like how, whether it's Spotify or whether it's just the way people are listening now, is that they will make the Spotify playlist the center of the scene or a sound or something. I think even in other genres, like, it is nice that they are able to give some artists, connect them with a bigger audience through the playlist. But I think there's a lot of problems that stem from there being this one playlist and people thinking this is what defines the genre. During the Nightcore days, like me and fanfiction, we were always talking about a genre coming from Nightcore. I was like, we need to make original Nightcore. Like, this, a genre has to come from this. So the fact that there is a genre that I think stems from Nightcore, and I don't feel like I'm associated with it. I don't think like the new generation of kids who are like on TikTok into hyperpop, or even some of the ones who are actually, you know, new and active to the scene even know who I am. And not to be like, oh, you should know who I am, but it's just like, for someone who was invested in there being a genre stemming from that, I definitely feel excluded.
Yeah. Before now, you know, where hyperpop was a thing, for a lot of us, we would use the term very much like a nostalgia thing. It's like, oh, remember hyperpop shows? Remember hyperpop? Yeah, it's all over now. Remember the death of Jag, the death of SPF420? We miss these things. Like, we always talked favorably about missing them because they had left. Like, no one said hyperpop anymore. And if they did, like, I didn't see it, you know? And so this happening now or more recently with like hyperpop, that term being thrown around a lot more, I do think there's a multitude of emotions. Seeing it used all over the place and seeing the term itself be bigger than it's ever been, it does feel at least a little bit weird that it's like, dang, I was that. And nobody knows or cares. Like, nobody's like, when somebody says like, oh, hyperpop music, I know exactly what sound they're talking about. And I know what fit and outfit. I know the auto-tune they're talking about. I know like that crunchy sound. They'll listen to one of my songs. They'll be like, I don't know what this is, but it's definitely not hyperpop. Giving Divio and giving like Mark Redito and giving all these people their flowers for being integral parts of hyperpop, I don't know what that does for any of us. It doesn't like pay our rent or anything. But it does feel like a little weird to be completely removed from something that you were at the like start and launch pad of. Like, people are like making show flyers for free. People are playing shows for free. People are buying their own tickets to fly themselves out to cities to play shows. Like, I flew myself out to shows to play because like I just wanted to play the show that bad. And I think it's just, there's a promise now. People are like, oh, Patrick Stump, hyperpop has direct veins to freaking Fall Out Boy now? Like, hyperpop used to not even have direct veins to like $15. I think people see that and they're like, oh, wait, I think I want this now. Where before, like, if people wanted to be in hyperpop, it was maybe for, I just want friends, man. Or like, I just want to feel like I belong somewhere.
The idea that one would consciously make a hyperpop song for the purpose of fitting into the contours of this playlist baffles many of the original members of the community.
I feel like that's the most important part of music, is being yourself and expressing, you know, what you actually feel. And if you're just trying to get on a playlist and like doing a specific thing, it's like, all right, well, I'm studying this track and I'm going to make something exactly like it, but this note's going to be different. And it's like, all right, this is mine now. I'm on the playlist. We did it. And nah, that's whack. That's super whack.
You're allowed to steal influences from people. I do it all the time. I don't know how you could be an artist unless you stole influence from someone. Take the influence that you like, do it, and then like make it worse or make it like crazier or something. You're allowed to attempt to make, you know, what people consider hyperpop, but like add to the conversation. Don't just like, you know, try to be a copy of other people. Like, do something that's interesting and then say like, I wish it was more like this, and then try that.
I would love to see something just come out of left field in the realm of hyperpop and just completely smash it all. It doesn't surprise me when I see Rebecca Black with 303 and Dylan Gex producing. That doesn't surprise me. Like, of course, like, okay, cool. I don't want hyperpop to be something that can't surprise me.
Don't think about this as a game to win. Being on the Hyperpop playlist is not a game winning strategy. I've been on there. I'm not a millionaire. You know what I mean? I haven't blown up. You know, it was a nice little moment. I felt appreciated. I felt appreciated by the community. But at the same time, I was like, you know, it's not over. Everybody wants a slice of the pie. Everyone wants to make as much money from you as possible. And you cannot let that influence your work. And you can't let that dilute your message.
This frustration is incredibly valid and understandable. But it's worth asking, is what's happening with hyperpop right now just a natural cycle of the music industry?
And these things are all cyclical. You know, things that get too corporate die pretty quickly. I'm not trying to be like a downer on anybody who wants to make hyperpop, right? Like that's like not my business at all. I'm just like, the models that current hyperpop are ascribing to are not original, new, interesting models. It's again, a very few people being selected from the scene to have money siphoned to them. Like the same thing with like grunge or rock, indie rock or punk or rap or anything, right?
When you're talking about like industries getting involved and stuff like that, like a certain sound and a certain type of attitude even in hyperpop now is kind of like rewarded. That's not even someone's fault. It's like anything that's around for a long time, it gets slowly streamlined like over time. Like, and I think that commercially helps the sound and the genre to have those guidelines. But I think that just a lot of us got like shaved off like over the years. I have a 2021 Omniboy audience that like comes to me and they're just like, yo, have you heard of 100 Gex? And like, they don't know anything. And I've thought about that. Like, why does it feel like we were all erased? And I don't think that is unique to hyperpop. I know there's definitely people that are frustrated with it. Like I've seen like tweets of people that are mad about it. But I think the one unanimous thing that a lot of people seem to get wrong with their frustration is that it's not like someone did this. Like, this is just the way actually the music industry works. Like, a thing is started, it's DIY, it benefits the people that don't get any help anywhere else, and then it gets built up. Hip hop now, it's like hip hop is like on top of the Billboard charts, but that's not where it came from. Like the reason hip hop existed is because it couldn't exist in real spaces. So it was like house parties and stuff. And a lot of times when people talk about hip hop, they're like, "Dang, I love Kanye, I love Jay-Z, I love Drake, and it's like they're not talking about like the people in the 80s and freaking the Bronx. Like they're not talking about them. And if they want to, they can like look up a hip hop documentary and learn if they really want to. But again, after they watch that documentary, somebody talks about hip hop, they're going to be like, yo, Drake, freaking like Jay-Z, like Kanye. And it's okay. Like, that's actually okay. Like, the common misconception is that it was like this malicious thing that like 100 Gex or like Dog Show Records is like conspiring to bury us all. And it's like, no, I think this is actually just how the industry works. And unfortunately for a lot of us, this was our first cycle of it.
I think for some people, it's like we're all still struggling in a lot of different ways. So when you commit as much time, like a lot of us did, to this scene, you're kind of every day you're watering this plant and it keeps growing and it keeps becoming more beautiful and all these buds start forming and it starts to flower. But like right in the middle point, when you're like, I have this amazing thing on my hands, somebody who has a million plants comes by, takes it and puts it in their pile, and then it transforms into this, fucking golden rose, and everybody's taking pictures of it and they're all fucking excited and you're pushed to the side. No one gives a shit. I totally understand how frustrating that is. I feel for them. For me, if it's so out of my control, why should I get worried about it? All it's going to do is make me feel fucking miserable. So like, instead, what did it give me that was good? Like, it gave me all of my friends. It gave me my new home. It gave me my new life. It gave me every single thing in my life right now. I think for some other people, it's very important that they get credit where credit's due, and that's fair. There's nothing wrong with that. You should be giving credit where it's due. I think if the music industry was not so fucking broken, then putting in hard work would mean you get a reward at some point. We don't live there.
Amongst all this confusion and frustration, we should try to keep track of the core of what makes this genre, this community, so special, even as it changes. So, what is hyperpop? If you've gotten this far, I apologize for this sort of shitty conclusion statement, but I feel like hyperpop is simply a vibe, a musical ethos. It is inherently silly.
I definitely think there's a sense of humor, but the love for it is very real.
That's what hyperpop is. It's this complete mixture between using sounds, knowing they can be interpreted in an ironic way, but it's coming from a sincere place of pleasure.
Just the art of hyperpop itself has ironic elements to it, which is what makes it so fun and so intriguing. Something that's, conventionally supposed to sound bad or weird is what makes the appeal of hyperpop.
If you think it's ironic, then you think it's ironic. But usually the case is that to the artist, it's just sounds good and they actually just like it. I do want people to see the sincerity in it and also not be afraid to be sincere about those things. They seem too silly to be sincere about, but something there, right? There's something genuinely there that I think should be spoken about.
Hyperpop embraces everything and is constantly evolving. It's punk music. It's doing whatever the hell you want.
I very much view hyperpop as like a very punk scene, right?
But there is kind of a punk ethos to it. I feel like it just kind of like levels the playing field in a lot of ways. Anybody can do this. Record this on your fucking laptop speaker in GarageBand or like even on your iPad or your phone or whatever you have access to. Like it's possible to make this.
It's the new punk music. Throws out old rules. It's loud, it's fast, it's forward thinking.
To be frank, if you're an artist in 2016 that was popping off then, that's 4 years ago, 5 years ago almost, and it would be insane to think that were the only artists out there. I think that the genre is evolving, if you want to call it a genre.
The sound has changed so drastically so quickly because what was experimental in 2016, it was old hat in 2017. It was like almost oldies in 2018. So now 2021, like how do you keep the sound of hyperpop going? Like you have to keep innovating. You have to keep pushing the sound and the envelope forward. So it, as a genre name, it's again almost kind of meaningless because how do you tag a genre that's evolving so quickly? The sound can change and can transform, and people yelling at me saying, you can't call this song hyperpop, and it's like, bro, I tagged that in 2016. I don't give a shit. I think regardless, the kind of ethos transferring is the most important aspect. The sound is always going to change.
At some point, these hyperpop kids would be like me, like older, and they would say, oh, this is what hyperpop is, but then there's a newer movement that emerged from the ashes of it, which I feel like is what music culture is in general. It's just built on top of each other.
You can sit and lament on what was and what is no longer, but like every day is something new. And that's for me what makes me excited. It's always something new and evolving, and sometimes some shit's gonna like not be what it was, but that's life. If that's life, homie.
The vibe has carried on through the years, and everybody influences each other. As culture changes, we adapt, and it's always going to be changing.
I struggled with saying I'm hyperpop and then not being hyperpop, even questioning if the music that I'm making now is hyperpop, because does it have that specific snare sample that's used in everything? Am I using enough saw sounds? Does this have a chime in it? Really basic, rudimentary things. I think in having this conversation with you, actually, it's sort of grounded me back to the idea that some of that stuff really doesn't matter. I think a lot of the intention behind what you make is what makes it possibly hyperpop.
Hyperpop is an internet escape.
I remember when I had barely any friends in real life. I was an only child. I was very isolated. I had friends online. They were artists like me, and I collaborated with them, and I sang on their beats, and I made my own production, and I learned a lot from them. And We partied online, man. We partied online, and it was some of the most important moments of my life. The sense of, there's no borders. We all can log on to fucking Minecraft. We all can log into a tiny chat room. We all can log into wherever.
All of us were kind of escaping something, which is why we were able to pour so much into our internet community. I don't think out of any of us we were really existing in our real lives. We were kind of existing through our music and through our internet. A lot of these new kids coming in and exploring the sound, I think they're the same kids we were. They'd want to express themselves and they want to be part of a community. So like, fucking go for it, guy. Like, I want you to find that family out there that's waiting for you and allowing you to present your true self.
People that are thriving in it right now are the people that are allowed to and need to be thriving in it right now. I am thankful that I even got to be a part of old Hyperpop. I do think that like when looking at the new Hyperpop thing, it's like, it is serving someone right now. This isn't the end of the world. There will be a new space for like new people to come together. You can't stop that from happening. Like as long as there's spaces, people are going to occupy them, people are going to create them. I don't pity or condescend the people that are like clenching onto like the Hyperpop mantle, like waiting for it to like pay off for them. But I hope that those people do find a way to like move on. I mean, I was angry all the way through like 2017, 2018, but then after a while I was like, you know what? Like I got what I wanted out of it. I got what I wanted out of the chiptune scene. There comes a time where it's like, okay, I got what I got out of there. Like it might be time for somebody else. We did occupy space. Like it's like, I'm not trying to turn like old Hyperpop into like the villains, but we did occupy a space and we crushed it. Might be time for somebody else to occupy that space. If there's like some 16-year-old kid that missed out on the freaking glory days of SoundCloud, maybe throwing them into the like grind machine of Spotify isn't the best intro to music. Like let them have this space.
So what's next? And how can we help keep this spirit alive while preventing this history from being lost?
Yeah, that's what's crazy. Is like part of me is like, oh, I really want music to sound like freaking Friday Night by GFOTY. I want that. I want that track she made in freaking 2012, 2011. That's insane. But the thing is, time marches on, baby. There is something sad about the source of things becoming lost, but that is also part of culture.
I think there's a lot of stuff that isn't on SoundCloud anymore. I was going back and looking for some tracks from like 2015 around that time, and they're not on SoundCloud anymore. Like all this stuff that like, I'm like, wait, like this is influencing certain artists now, but you can't find them. So if you didn't know about it, you would not be able to find out about it.
I think what happened back in like the early 2010s, like definitely needs to be remembered. I wouldn't agree that it's fading away. I think it's definitely changing. The players are changing and stuff. Yeah. Again, cyclical things, they like to shine a spotlight on something that's not real and everything underneath. We're worried it dies, but it doesn't really die. It just changes form. What's going to be surprising is not something coming from someone in my generation. It's going to be someone coming up. But I also hope to, just as kind of mentor young artists and young curators and people who want to get involved in this stuff to, keep their head on straight and do it for reasons that will actually help everybody versus helping a few people.
The main thing that kind of inspired me to even to think about any of this kind of stuff in the first place, even before I joined any kind of scene or whatever, was I watched this documentary about the rise of grunge called Hype. And it was interviewing artists like from that scene who I'd never heard of. And I was like, wait, I'm into like this genre. Like, how come I haven't heard of these guys? And you sort of learn about how certain artists like start getting bigger until it gets to a point where like a genre hits like a certain point. And ultimately, it's impossible for the industry to give every single tiny artist involved in that scene like a massive advance and shit. It's hard to kind of portray like the full history of a really intricate scene with lots of histories to people. It'll be a bit weird to go up to someone and they'll be like, hey, I love 100 Gex. And I'll be like, hey, great, here's this massive mind map of artists from like 2012 who started influencing people who started influencing them. And like, here's what all they're doing now. Like, it's just like not reasonable. But I think the cool thing about the internet is how this information could actually get out there and be at least accessible, We're still at such a early point in net gaming, any kind of mainstream acknowledgement. But I'd like to think it's made people a little bit more open to kind of sillier forms of music kind of thing. I think even if like people don't remember the fundamentals of like how it started, I think the spirit will always be there. I think as long as the music continues to inspire people, then that's the main thing,
And it makes me feel like everything I could ever